Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Jolin, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Results for America. We're proud to be hosting today's session with our fabulous partners, the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Bloomberg Philanthropies. First, I want to reaffirm that the Local Infrastructure Hub is very committed to continuing to serve as a trusted resource for cities and towns as we all navigate through the transitions at the federal level. We'll continue to offer clear and actionable updates and insights into the infrastructure funding landscape and to provide opportunities for local leaders to showcase their leadership and innovation. Today, we'll be discussing how to leverage ballot initiatives to cover the costs of needed infrastructure investments. Federal funding isn't always enough to get the project across the finish line, as we all know, and the funding award might simply not be enough on, to complete the. I think someone has yeah, there we go. So federal funding might not always be enough to get a project across the finish line, or the funding award might be contingent on cities providing matching dollars from non-federal sources. So to overcome this barrier, many local leaders have turned to locally authorized financing streams, like those approved through ballot measures, to form a critical part of the capital stack for local infrastructure projects. So a lot of these measures have been successful. In 2024, 75% of transportation ballot measures passed around the country. And so today we're going to hear some key takeaways from city leaders who have successfully leveraged ballot initiatives to secure this infrastructure funding. Before we dive in, we want to hear from you to inform the session. So please take a moment to respond to the poll that we're just about to put up. And then from there, I am going to thank everyone and just welcome our fabulous partner, Mary Ellen Wiederwald, who's the president and CEO of Accelerator for America, who many of you are very familiar with their incredible work. She's going to kick off today's session. And I want to just thank you, Mary Ellen, for joining and turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. It's great to be back here with everyone on the Local Infrastructure Hub with our partners with Results for America, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I'm Mary Ellen Wiederwohl. I'm the president and CEO of Accelerator for America. And our sister organization you're going to hear more about today, Accelerator for America Action, a 501c4 organization that helps to support local communities on their ballot measures for transit, transportation, and infrastructure. Our two organizations were founded at the same time in 2017. Many of you have been involved in our work to help promote greater economic mobility across the U.S., supporting mayors and other local leaders, helping you find and develop the best solutions, and then sharing, scaling, and replicating those across our platform. So you may know less about our C4 work. It was actually part of the catalyst for the founding of Accelerator. We were founded by former Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, and that catalyst was the passage of Measure M in Los Angeles in 2016, which to this day is the largest ballot measure ever passed anywhere for anything, $120 billion over 40 years, and they don't even have a sunset on that. And if you've tried to get around LA, you can say, yep, they're going to need every dime of that to help improve their transit and transportation infrastructure. And the voters said yes to that because they got tired of sitting in traffic. So when Mayor Garcetti was successful at passing this and founded Accelerator in 2017 to help cities help each other, people said, hey, how did you do that? We want to do that in our communities. And so since that founding in 2017, through our 501c4 Accelerator for America Action, we have been working with local leaders like those you'll hear from today to support new measures. And in our lifetime there, short since 2017, we have helped communities secure $75 billion in new funding for infrastructure. So we're going to talk today about how you too can get on that bandwagon. I'm excited to be joined by Mayor Freddie O'Connell from Nashville. You're going to hear from him soon. And our friend from Columbus, the city leader, deputy director of the Department of Public Services, Randy Borntrager. Randy is a campaign veteran who's been involved in several of these and was involved soup to nuts there in the project in Columbus. And so you're going to hear from them shortly. They are the real stars of today's show. They were the ones on the ground who got it done. I'm going to kick us off today with a little bit of an overview. As you know, we're a part of Local Infrastructure Hub, have been for the last year and a half, and we've been producing case stories, telling the stories of how you've been getting things done at the local level and helping others to learn from your success, your process, and sometimes how you learn from failure to then later make success. So we have a case story out now on these local ballot measures. We look forward to you reading it and coming back to us with questions and maybe raising your hand and saying, hey, could you come support me in my community? The mayor of Nashville is going to tell a long story of his engagement. He started on this journey actually as a transit board member before he was mayor. Couldn't have had a better advocate in the mayor's office than someone who had been there on the front lines. And like I said, Randy, from a long history there in the city and on campaigns. All of these start somewhere. They might start with a vision from a local leader. They might start bubbling up from community. They usually start from some pain point in your community. Traffic is bad. We need better stoplights. We need better pedestrian access. We need our roads and our sidewalks to be safer. This rally cry can come from anyone, from anywhere. And when that starts to gel and starts to aggregate into a movement, the first thing you need to do as a community is get a plan. Plan development is the first stage of this process you'll read about in the case story that we have published. And it involves all the things that many of you know full well about. It's very similar to the process of getting ready to apply for a grant, updating your comprehensive plans, your strategic multimodal transportation plan, your TIPs and your SEDS and all of those kinds of things. It's a very similar plan development process. You must engage community. You have to define what you need, what you want, and ultimately what it's going to cost. And as you start to get an idea about what you're going to need and what it's going to cost, then you need to get some friends on the legal side of the house and the folks who oversee your elections to start to understand what is your path to the ballot. Every locality and every state will be just a little bit different. Some states limit what localities can do. Unfortunately, we know all about municipal preemption in this business. So your state may give you a broad grant of authority to pursue a measure on all sorts of things. And you could go anytime to the ballot and ask for any type of taxation, sales tax, property tax, even occupational tax. Most states are going to limit through statute what you can go for and how much you can go for, and maybe even when you can have it on the ballot. So you need to cozy up to those good government law friends and understand what you are able to do and if you need to go to your legislature to get new approvals. And then you're going to start to think about a campaign, and we're going to get into more talk about that in this discussion. Setting up a campaign structure for a ballot measure is pretty similar to setting up a campaign structure for getting elected to city council or becoming mayor. You have to have people who support your effort. You have to have a pathway to the ballot and the paperwork, and you have to raise money to get your message out. Voters aren't just going to say yes to raise their taxes just because traffic is bad or just because the city council maybe voted unanimously to put it on the ballot. You have to tell people what they're voting for. You have to create a value proposition that they then want to say, yes, I'm willing to pay more in a property tax. I'm willing to improve a new bond measure, or I'm willing to increase the sales tax to pay for X, whatever's in your plan. So those are the three big components going into this. I want you to know, and also to know that plan development, pathway to the ballot, and running a campaign are not entirely sequential activities. There's sort of a beautiful bubble chart of Venn diagram where many of these things are coming alongside each other and happening at the same time, overlapping as you're getting closer and closer to putting something towards the voters. So that's a quick overview, and I'm eager to get into this conversation today with the mayor and with Randy. And Mayor, we will start with you. I said here at the outset, you've got a nice long history with this, but so does your community. Many people are probably familiar with the fact that Nashville tried to vote for an increase in transit and transportation funding in a plan in 2018, and it did not pass. But yet this year, your measure passed with 2/3 of the support from the voters. Tell us more about what you did, how you did it, and that earlier plan development process.
Sure. And thank you, Mary Ellen. Appreciate you all, Results for America, USCM, and our friends at Bloomberg for being a part of this collaboration. I do think this work is so important. And I think we're stepping into a space now where the important work of cities is going to be at the vanguard of how we deliver success to Americans in communities large and small. And so this was why this exercise was in part so important to us in a big election year. And I would say part of my answer comes from a moment where one of our statewide think tanks hosted a visit from Jeanette Sedek-Khan from Bloomberg, in fact. And, she was saying, it seems like you've gotten to this point pretty quickly. And I said, well, I guess it depends on how you're looking at things, because for me, this has been a journey of 20 years. And it goes back to time just as a private citizen returning to my hometown when I got a different look at the landscape of mobility when it turns out that I guess I may have a personal curse with regard to car access, because a car I thought I was going to have after college. There's some dispute in our family about whether my brother or my father was responsible for its final days, but it turns out I did not actually have access to that car after all. And then as soon as my girlfriend went to pursue pre-medical education, leaving her car in my care, it had a catastrophic transmission failure. And so I spent a couple of years car free in Nashville, which was no easier back 20 years ago than it was today, and started having the opportunity to work with local advocates. And it was interesting to see things again, not only through my lived experience, but with folks in our disability community, and thinking about schools access and some other lenses through which mobility starts to matter. And then sadly, we kind of stayed stuck in neutral in terms of offering Nashvillians options. We also have a pretty robust region. For people who don't know, we're a consolidated city-county government. So we've got 526 square miles that we've tried to manage in fits and starts. And we've experienced a lot of dynamic economic growth and also dynamic residential growth, both in the city of Nashville and the surrounding 10-county region. And so I had this experience working with advocacy organizations, got to serve on the Nashville MTA Board of Directors for 7 years, starting in 2008. Subsequently got elected to the Metro Council in large part because I wanted to work on the fiscal issues related to transit. And then while I was doing both of those things in 2012, roughly, Mayor Carl Dean tried our first kind of high capacity demonstration project, a project called the AMP. It sort of collapsed under the weight of a high net worth corridor, having a dramatically romantic attachment to left turn lanes into driveways along the corridor. And then in 2018, then Mayor Megan Barry pursued legislation under new state enabling legislation, bipartisan state legislation called the Improve Act, that gave local jurisdictions, for the first time ever, the opportunity in Tennessee to pursue dedicated funding for transit improvement programs. So we looked at basically that 2018 effort and tried to draw as many lessons as we could, both from a policy standpoint, but also, frankly, from a politics standpoint. And so we decided to not pursue a shoot the moon approach, but rather a little bit more of a scattershot element that incorporated multiple things that would improve mobility, including good news for motorists in the form of green lights, good news for pedestrians in the form of a large number of new miles of sidewalk, and then, of course, traditional transit service, primarily through traditional bus, but also our expectation that we may be able to pursue some standardized bus rapid transit as a part of the initiative. And then a fourth pillar that's kind of underpinning all of them, of safety. And so we wanted those four key principles of sidewalk, signal service, and safety to be understood by voters. And I think by the end of the campaign, they were pretty well understood. And so we knew, starting the day I was elected, we brought our transit agency, our local DOT, and our planning department, because we knew there would not only be sophisticated planning needs, but also that's the home to our housing division. And we wanted this to be something that was an affordability measure in addition to a mobility measure, and to align with our housing strategy as much as possible. And kind of to what Mary Ellen said, the clock started ticking from that point, where we looked at all of the traps. We knew we had to have our Department of Law make an assessment of, under the state enabling legislation, the Improve Act, could we hit a ballot target of November 2024? We had to have our finance department make a determination about the financial envelope and the instruments available to us, and whether we could get comptroller approval and an independent audit completed in time to hit that. We knew we had to work with the Davidson County Election Commission to make sure we could get it on the ballot. The Metro Council, our local legislative body, to make sure they could approve it before it got to ballot. And so we had those kind of 5 key things. We had to have departmental and collaboration with the mayor's office design of the program. We had to have legal analysis to ensure it was consistent with state enabling legislation. We had to have financial analysis to ensure it cleared all of the financial hurdles and kind of accountability framework in that enabling legislation. Had to work with our Metro Council and the Election Commission to get it there. And everyone will be unsurprised, I'm sure, to learn that it is currently facing an appeal in court because sore losers lost poorly and continue to do so. We know that it is fully legal, and we look forward to winning on appeal. We've already defended successfully in court once, but all along that way, we knew that the mayor's office would have a key information-based role. And one of the other things we saw in 2018 was that a lack of engagement at the council level and some community level meant a couple things. We established 2 key stakeholder groups: a technical advisory committee for subject matter expertise that was sort of partner driven and community based, and then a community advisory committee that was really more about, okay, are the technical ideas in this hitting where we want them to geographically, impact wise, level of understanding, and so forth. And we had those 2 bodies active throughout the spring, launched the program formally in April, and then maintained those committees throughout. Had engagement with all of our council members, at least extended invitations. I think we had 38 out of the 40 council members come in and visit with us. And then our transit team in the mayor's office went out. We had 1 new staff hire to lead this, basically a director of transportation planning in the mayor's office. And he and other key members would go visit neighborhood associations, academic work groups, private sector partners, and just anywhere that we could find to have a public information meeting. We went out and did it. Separately, we knew we wanted to do something also a little different from 2018, which is, rather than running this as a PR campaign, we knew we had to win an election. And so we approached it much more from the standpoint of using a lot of the lessons that were successful in our mayor's race, including a big grassroots effort, a lot of door-to-door contact, a large coalition that approached it from different angles. We had some independent expenditure efforts that were not coordinated with us, but had coalition partners that I know would be familiar to both Accelerator for America team and our Bloomberg friends. And it was interesting to see that, because you had business landscape support, labor landscape support, kind of grassroots orgs landscape support, all while we were supporting it underneath with high quality information. And so all of that led to a great 2-1 victory at the ballot box in November. And I'll stop there, Mary Ellen.
Well, it won't be stopped. We'll just put a semicolon in the sentence. There's a lot more to learn from your experience, and that is a great intro to a number of the components of how you built this for success. And Randy, moving over to you in Columbus, you all have had an equally long journey. Mayor took us back to 2012 in Nashville. You all worked on the Link Us plan for over a decade. And worked across your region with your transit agency there that covers more than just the city of Columbus. So give us a similar background on your journey to success.
Yeah, in 2014, our MORBC, our planning commission, identified through their Insight 2050 study that as a region we were going to gain over 1 million more people. So we knew that we were growing fast, and then we Dakota, which is our transit authority, also did a kind of a next gen look several years later, 2017, that looked at like, how do we focus that growth? What expansion do we need? How can we accommodate some of that? And so then in 2019, we did a corridor concepts study that kind of galvanized the region around the idea of focused growth. So instead of spreading growth like peanut butter over a piece of bread, focusing that growth, 60% of our jobs and housing along key corridors. And so, that kind of birthed the Link Us initiative in 2019. And that's where we became hyper-focused on the actual, not so much planning anymore, but actually like engaging and really having a body language saying that we were going to do this. And so started that public outreach, build out coalition partners. So the city of Columbus was a key partner, but so was the Franklin County Commissioners, MORPC, the Regional Planning Commission, and CODA, as well as the Columbus Partnership, which is some of the largest business leaders here in Central Ohio. And so started that collaboration and really focused on what that plan was going to look like. And then kind of built that into different committees. As the mayor was saying, we had a similar structure with kind of a equitable transit-oriented development committee. We had a workforce committee, as well as a public engagement committee, all formed with different elected officials and other leaders throughout the community, chambers, those type of things, to come together and have a shared vision. And so we did a number of other, state of mobility reports and those type of things. So that really was going to culminate in 2022 when we were going to take this to the ballot, or so we thought. And as folks might remember, there was a lot of inflationary pressure, and a lot of our research showed that with a $8 billion initiative, that maybe we pause and take our time and continue our engagement. And so it really kind of transitioned us from what we call it Link Us is the name of the campaign, basically. And so we went from what is Link Us into a much more telling the story through personal connections. And so really went down the path of telling people stories about why they need this, and focus on the 44% increase in CODA bus service, as well as the transit supportive infrastructure, which is about 60 million a year for sidewalks and trails and mobility options, right? So through the research, we found that there was a high affinity for CODA. People like CODA even if they didn't use it. But also, what is it in it for me? If you don't live along those corridors, well, you're talking about building walkable, bikeable communities. And so that, the actual public information spending on the official side of the ledger really didn't talk that much about bus rapid transit, even though we were the largest city in the nation without any type of rapid transit. For most residents, they were interested in more sidewalks and more CODA. More 44%
She didn't
more
say
bus
no, let's say.
for those that need it. And so we really, just because all our transit advocates are really interested in that bus rapid transit or the debate over light rail versus BRT, they're in there. The average voter was looking at it through a prism of I got 1 million more people coming to this region. I don't want 1 million more cars. We need more CODA service and we need more sidewalks. And ultimately that was the main focus of our messaging. And we decided to go on, all the research also showed, with help from Josh Cohen and Accelerator, taking a look at other successful transit options. Like, let's go with a high turnout election in 2024. And so put that on there, and really made the case. We did a ton through our official capacities to educate our residents, and then the campaign obviously took care of the final push for the the unofficial, the campaign, the voter side of things. But all in all, it was a long slog starting working on this myself in 2019. I have other duties of the job. I don't even focus on this kind of full time, and it was an effort with all four of our kind of partners, and got it over the line, and really going to transform the region.
Thank you. That's such a great and a candid story about where you've been and how you've got here. You both have plans that are focused on bus rapid transit, on BRT. Mayor, you all had a debate in Nashville about whether to bring in light rail or not. Obviously, that will apply mostly in conversation in bigger places. But tell us a little bit about that tipping point for you all. How did you decide what went in and what did not, and maybe wait for another day?
Yeah, a great important question that goes again back to 2018 and sort of lessons learned, as well as kind of got some new color in the mayor's race. And so in 2018, the Mayor Barry's plan called Let's Move Nashville was very much a light rail intensive program with, I think, 80% of the capital cost going to light rail. And reality is, if you're looking at trying to deliver rail projects successfully, we really only have one fairly short urban corridor that would produce what you would think of as success from a ridership and capacity standpoint with density of commercial and residential. And so I think there was a fairly easy analysis to say this was very forward looking, and maybe 25 years out, the rail plan would actually fit population density along the alignments. But it wasn't a day one, hey, even if we built these corridors, by the time they started running, you'd probably see fairly low ridership. And so we looked at that analysis, but we also just looked at where we were. We had done, for people who don't know, one of the most impactful stories for Nashville that definitely shaped the mayor's race in 2023 was that we had a record-setting public subsidy established for a new stadium for the Titans, our NFL team. That consumed 1% of our hotel motel tax, which is bumping right up against the ceiling of our allowances for that tax capacity and authority at all. And so with the 6 revenue sources available under the Improve Act, our state enabling legislation, the only 2 that really give you system building capacity are a sales tax surcharge and a hotel motel tax surcharge. Well, we're hitting the ceiling on hotel motel, which we just raised to keep things simple and avoid further irritating the hospitality industry. Our only real option was to use the sales tax surcharge. The Berry program raised it over, it would have pushed us to 10.25% aggregate sales tax, which I thought was unreasonably high. And so we wanted to stay under a 10% ceiling, basically hitting what our max local option sales tax would be in that capacity. So we had about 0.5% left there. So we used that 0.5% surcharge. That gave us a financial envelope that we then looked at the balance of options, and you could turn, knobs and dials to get to where you wanted to be. But even if one of the conversations that came up in the mayor's race was one candidate suggesting, hey, what about a light rail route from the airport to downtown? And that sounds great. And it probably, like many cities that have better transit-based access from the airport to the city, it is a nice to have option. But if you evaluated it at a cost of $300 million or more per mile for light rail implementation starting fresh today, and again, pushing these costs out a few years into the future after design and NEPA and everything else, the cost would probably approach $400 million per mile. At that cost, we start to capsize the broad 526 square mile value that we can offer. I mean, otherwise, we're getting to upgrade about 2/3 of our signalized intersections in the city, lay fiber, deliver a whole bunch of technology, some roadway safety, some Vision Zero programming, 86 miles of sidewalk, incredible 15-year build out of a better transit system with a dozen community transit centers, 17 park and rides, regional enhancements. I mean, the list goes on of the things we're able to accomplish simply by choosing a mode that moves people almost as efficiently as light rail at less than half the cost per mile of implementation.
It was
I'll say the debate did not last particularly long.
It's a much better deal. And particularly, Randy, you mentioned the economic pressures keeping you off the ballot in 2022. Those remained in the debate very much in 2024. And there will always be a debate about what are people willing to pay for. And it becomes then the value proposition. Do they see something in it for themselves? You both mentioned polling and consumer research that you've done. Randy, you mentioned the official side and there's the unofficial side. Will you tell us a little bit more about the official side, the unofficial side, and how those work together and evolve as you get closer to the ballot?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the official side, I say that because, code is different in the city and the government, but we worked well together as a team. And so a lot of transit agencies do consumer research, for instance. And so we can test some things just there. It's not a likely voter screen or anything, but you can get a general sense of where people are and the pressures and the common knowledge that growth is on people's minds. We have intel that's coming. There's these huge things in Central Ohio that are kind of swirling around, and people understanding that growth is a challenge, and if they want a quality of life that we become used to here, that we have to do something to address the folks that are moving in, and so as the fastest growing city and region and the Midwest, we have long known that. And so on the official side, we were allowed to communicate, we were allowed to inform. We couldn't talk about voting and those type of behaviors, but we certainly could go out with a marketing campaign as well as an intensive engagement effort. So had in-person one-on-one conversations with over 40,000 people over the last 2 years, and had millions of impressions and engagements on different advertising channels. And so we carried that all the way through November of 2024. And and in Ohio, as long as I'm on my own time and unclassified employees on their time, they also can volunteer for other activities. And so there was a campaign structure that was built out, and that went through the research components and their advertising strategies and things like that supported and had their own website and supported that vote effort. So we were free on the government side to educate, and so we built out a robust kind of presence, not only on the ground but also online, make sure people had all the information they needed to have for information about the Link Us effort, and then the campaign side of things kind of took care of that persuasion messaging and those. We also were lucky enough not to have organized opposition. And so but we were, on the campaign side, they were entirely ready if that did happen. But the two kind of worked in parallel very well, and ultimately brought us home in what was a very challenging year in Ohio, and certainly even in the region, with some communities just outside of the Dakota service area losing different school levies and things like that, where they were taking some tax increases forward. So it wasn't a slam dunk. And in 2022, we decided we're not messing around with 8 billion. Let's make sure we have the foundation in place and that people understand what we're trying to do. And ultimately that, I think, led us to some really good decisions and moving forward into the 2024 with both sides kind of working in tandem or parallel.
You all obviously had great success, and I appreciate you sharing as a public official how you walked that line, and similar to the laws and the path to the ballot being unique to each place will have their own set of local rules, and maybe even state statutes, codes of ethics that everybody needs to look into and understand. What am I doing in my official capacity? What can I do in the evenings, on the weekends? Because there will be a campaign structure that is run by people who are not in government, but there needs to be able to be a communication channel between those two things. And Mayor, I'm going to come back to you, but with this preface, you've heard this before from us. When we are talking to a community about doing one of these, we're looking for a collection of prerequisites to be in place or lining up before we say, yep, you're ready to go. The top prerequisite is an engaged and vocal top elected official, just like Mayor O'Connell. So check the box there in Nashville. Mayor Ginther in Columbus was also very much involved championing this issue. Mayor Gallego in Phoenix, the Maricopa County one, another great example. So that's check box number one. The second box is you have to have a very involved local business and civic community, and they need to add their voices to it. But frankly, campaigns cost money. And so we need people who can write checks to further the campaign. You need to have a professional campaign structure. We've talked about that. And when you go out for your first big poll, official baseline poll, you want to see 60% of the respondents to that poll saying, yes, I'm willing to pay more for this plan. And so, Mayor, you were in a really unique and special position, being a voice and a face of this plan, new mayor who had run on this issue, coming in with that wind at your back. Tell us more about how you coordinated with the business community, with the campaign. You all raised more than $3 million for this campaign, and that was a joint effort.
Yeah, really interesting collection of not just the prerequisites, but I think even going beyond that. I have to say up front, um, I was very lucky to also join a cohort of mayors who were providing thought leadership on the ground in their own communities. Mayor Gallego in Phoenix was one of the first people to reach out to me, and specifically to recommend, as a new mayor, getting connected to Accelerator for America. Multiple mayors, both previous mayors of Nashville and mayors connecting with us after the election, helped us with multiple programs with Bloomberg and getting connected to those. So again, there is a national cohort of very successful, very engaged mayors who want to help their peers succeed. And I think that was actually a key ingredient for us, and maybe not a formal prerequisite in the way that you all talk about, but I will say for me personally, very helpful. Similarly, I have to say, organizations like Think Tennessee, even though they're statewide in focus, it turns out data they provided, I honestly feel like helped Nashvillians find within themselves that level of inspiration and ambition, and maybe even a little bit of competitiveness, because we were able to go out and talk to our own community and say, look, we're one of the last remaining top 50 American cities that doesn't have anything lined up to deliver sustainable transportation and infrastructure funding. And Memphis is one of the other four that were there at that point. And that was Think Tennessee. But yeah, I think once we got started and could sort of look at that, I was given courage during the lead up to what became the full campaign, because at the 5-year anniversary of the failure of the 2018 referendum, a pretty broad coalition of folks, business organizations like the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, and kind of an offshoot organization of theirs called Moving Forward Tennessee, that was really one of the pieces of infrastructure helping carry the torch in between referendum efforts. A Transit Alliance of Middle Tennessee, which was a regional kind of nonprofit education initiative that was based very much on a Denver model that we saw back in 2008 when I was on a trip out there, and Mayor Dean came back and kind of helped get that set up. Among other things, we had a couple of organizations like Walk Bike Nashville, who were interested in multimodal initiatives of it. Transit Now Nashville, sort of a pro transit oriented organization. And then key among them, though, were our Greater Nashville Realtors. We had organizations like that who I think understand both the business case, but also the livability case and understand that we're losing ground in a competitiveness as a city scenario and a broader scenario. And so Greater Nashville Realtors not only were engaged in that 5-year anniversary moment, but they turned out to be one of our most substantial individual contributors to the campaign. Um, and it's interesting because hearing Randy sort of talk about that role, I personally did not stay particularly engaged in the campaign. It was almost like I was an ex officio board member. I couldn't, there were some things that I legally should stay away from. And a lot of the fundraising activity was part of that. But I wasn't operationally involved in the day-to-day activity of the campaign, but we felt like we had a pretty good official governmental framework for communicating the core ideas, and the campaign honestly could draft off of that pretty easily. And I felt like it naturally, because it was so quick to follow on the heels of our successful mayor's race, a lot of the political elements, I think, were familiar to people. And so we had a lot of our canvassing team had already worked just the year prior. And I think for so many people who know how ephemeral campaign work can be, I think a lot of people felt encouraged that they could immediately jump back in and work on something they believed in. And I think the same was true for a lot of people in the business community. They knew how important this was. And as we shored up business support, particularly in the runoff in 2023, converting that into business stories here in 2024 was so successful. But Randy also said something that was noteworthy. Along the lines of engaging council members early, we engaged organizations like Americans for Prosperity in the Tennessee chapter. We engaged the Beacon Center, one of our statewide kind of libertarian conservative aligned think tanks. We engaged the Davidson County Republican Party. We engaged people, individuals who had been core to previous opposition efforts, and we sort of walked them through our thinking and invited feedback and invited concerns and criticisms. And by the time we were up and running, we also were very fortunate not to have very much in the way of organized opposition. I mean, what was there was really interesting because it seemed sort of to just capture the, a general sense of angry resentment and didn't have a groundswell of grassroots response. And so I think it was a nice moment for the city to reflect on how, hey, we can do things that are big and important and good and popular all at the same time. And on election night, one of my favorite things was just the sheer breadth of the coalition you could behold that had all come out to celebrate together. And that's a really good and healthy thing, I think, for a city to be able to do that. That is like, hey, you're pulling together the coalition that reminds people why they love your city in the first place.
It's beautifully said. One of my favorite experiences of being there on the ground with Nashville was actually during the campaign. It was an open seat for mayor, nonpartisan primary with 14 candidates. And the business community and advocacy community, civic leadership organized a series of forums on different topics. And I came into Nashville for the forum on transit and transportation needs of the community. And it's one of the most amazing American small d democratic experiences I've had recently. You had all of these candidates sitting on the stage and a good dozen folks who could speak cogently about the needs and the opportunities. And nobody called anybody a name, and there was no negativity, and there was just this rich dialogue. And so I mentioned that because it's just part of what was going on in Nashville. And think about what's going on in your community. What are people asking for? What are people knowledgeable about and talking about? And how can you throw some fuel on that fire and get more of those places where people are talking about this? And it becomes an expectation for your elected leaders and your future candidates that they're going to be addressing this. We've got some opportunity for questions here coming up. And as we get into those, Randy, I want to throw a question to you. Mayor O'Connell talked about the lack of organized opposition. You mentioned that as well. Other than Mayor, I do have to love the comment you made about the prior plan, two plans ago, falling to the opposition of a romantic attachment to left turn lanes. I don't think I've ever heard those words together in a sentence. But people are opposed to things for lots of reasons. And in Nashville, y'all did a great job of basically cutting off your opposition before it could even get there, get to the starting line. Randy, but what do you think your success was in keeping the opposition at bay?
Steal that line. That was fun. So consider that stolen. That Mayor Ginther had, instructed us at the very beginning that we needed to be intentional in our reach. And so because we had such a long time, and then even when we decided to postpone when we went forward with this, it gave us 2 extra years, right? And so we really did intentional engagement across all sectors. So over 500 kind of meet and greets and going and doing list sessions and going business by business, sometimes different sectors. The realtors were brought up, the chambers of commerce, attended every municipalities, city council meetings, and informed all the elected officials and brought people on board that were on the corridors and off the corridors. Really try to address every concern that we saw, and what we saw is that there was really broad and deep support among different groups, right? So while an average person on the street at the beginning might not have known too much about the Link Us effort, we certainly started with a lot of the stakeholder type folks, those that were key decision makers and influencers in the region, and brought folks along. I think it was a huge coalition, and it was intentional. But starting early and having a plan, and working with our amazing elected officials and Mayor Ginther and City Council here, and there's over 20 municipalities in the Dakota service area, as well as townships and all sorts of others. And so it really took, we knew that we wanted to touch each one at least 3 times in a year, and we ratcheted that up in that final year quite dramatically. And so I think that the shared vision was set early. It was co-collaborative. So we um, didn't see any particular industry or even stakeholder group in opposition. There were some that weren't sure. And so our job was, someone said, well, I've never heard of Lincoln. So, well, invite us. Let me tell you about it. We'll show up at your next meeting. And so our transit advocates, we learned from Austin, who when they went to the ballot previously and they lost, the transit community wasn't bought in, right? And so then they went back with more support. And so we had those discussions with other cities, and so made an intentional effort of bringing along those folks and having them part of the team, so to speak. And so and that's just a lot of work, but it is one that we could build out a team, and between the 4 agencies, really cover a lot of ground. And so I think it speaks to the collaboration between Morpsey, CODA, the city, county, and business community, to really put effort into it, not just check a box, yeah, I support it, but actually go out and work it. So I think it speaks a lot to the collaborative nature of what we did over a period of years.
I'm reminded of that great sports statement that a strong offense is the best defense. And from what I saw from both of you all, that certainly measured up here. You got out ahead, built a plan that had a lot of support, addressed in some cases directly head on the opposition. The other thing we know about opposition is they don't want to lose. And if you can present the face and present the data and a strong campaign that this is going to win, you probably will not get well-funded, well-organized opposition. If they smell that there's weakness and blood in the water, they might be coming out to pile on.
The one thing I'll say about that, Mary Ellen, is we discovered it's an interesting and fine line to walk, because there were a couple of moments as we were talking to larger historic donors where, I think you all understood this. As we were looking at polling for most of 2024, we were treading water close to that 60% mark. And actually, we were delighted to overperform our trend lines across the year. But there was a little bit of reluctance in some of those major donor conversations because there was this assumption, well, this is just going to pass. And it's like, well, we're looking at headwinds. We have an uncertain federal election on the horizon. You never like there are different undercurrents of everything from public safety things to the fact that this is a voluntary, uh, you know, uh, kind of grocery and activity tax surcharge in a moment where across the country we're seeing evidence that inflationary economic reactions are pushing things in a different direction. And so I like we it's that weird line to walk between, yes, the confidence that we're going to execute a good campaign around a great plan, but to have to fight the complacence of it's going to win, and so we're going to stop giving money.
You were too convincing, I suppose. I do want to address real quickly one question that I've seen pop up in the chat here, and that's about whether this has to always be a tax increase. And the answer is no, but most of the time you are looking for new revenue. And again, this goes back to what your authorizing statutes allow. There are a lot of places in the country where localities vote all the time on bond measures. And that is because in those places, your state legislature, your state constitution doesn't give the locality the right to do bonding without a vote of the people. And so some of you on this call may be very used to going to the ballot every year, twice a year to vote for bonds on XYZ. And so there could be a bond campaign. Most of those bonds are attached to some type of revenue stream, often a property tax or a millage. So this is a reason to get into conversation with your city attorney, county attorney, and understand what your options are locally. In most of these cases, like I said, we're looking for new revenue. If you do a bond, you might be able to get money up front now that you can invest in something your community needs that then, of course, you pay off over the course of 20 years. And I'll give a plug now. Anybody who is paying attention to what's going on in DC, we need to be sure to lobby for our muni bond tax exemption. That's going to obviously impact a lot of this. Is even those of you who are not doing a bond vote, you're doing a tax vote, you're probably going to bond some of your work, or you're going to continue with your local revenue streams, bonding some of this, and that helps get more into the ground more quickly. So we need to be pushing that at the federal level.
Well,
So-
and Mary Ellen, I may jump in there with a little bit more on that point too. So we had there was a thread of a kind of line of attack on the program that said, why don't we just do this with property taxes, right? And they were kind of doing math along the lines of how much we would raise through this on a year-over-year basis. But the reality is, one, it doesn't become dedicated revenue, it just inflates the general fund. And two, to do it that way, we can put general obligation bonds in Nashville under Charter 2 referenda, but it's the longevity of these projects. You don't get the federal match guarantees, even the state match guarantees, if you can't say when you start a project that you've got the certainty to complete it. And so individual, like, yeah, maybe we could have done 30 different individual bond issuances for every project that's in our program, but from an actual program implementation standpoint, being able to count on the reliability of the revenue across a 15-year build out horizon made so much more sense to have that be dedicated funding. And yes, to your point, across that horizon, we will be using some portion of it for operating, including transit-based security, including, an offset for our local transit authorities' actual operating budget. Not in its entirety, but there will be some operating expenses drawn directly from that revenue that actually help relieve pressure on our general fund. And then, yes, we will also bond out some significant portions when we can do it as a package that supports the projects.
The answer is all of the above. Well, we have taken ourselves right here to the end of our discussion. Thank you both for your time today, sharing your talents, your insights, your candor. You're seeing a poll pop up there for some closing questions here. And most importantly, thank you both and Mayor Ginther for the leadership that you have shown in your community and across the country, hopefully giving us a pace setter there to follow in many more places. With that, Jamie, I will throw it to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. Thank you, Mayor O'Connell. Thank you, Randy, for sharing your insights about what I know is a long road that it often takes for cities to be able to get these measures across. And so I'm sure that the cities on today's call really benefited from hearing about that. As Mary Ellen said, please respond to our Zoom poll because it helps us be able to figure out what supports to continue providing to cities to make sure that we're being actionable and meeting you all where you're at. In the same vein, and Daly, if you wouldn't mind just putting up the slide, we are keeping our boot camp registration open for just a couple more days because we know that, as Michelle mentioned earlier, cities are really trying to understand what's happening with these federal funding programs. And these boot camps are providing day-to-day insights that are relevant to the specific topic areas. And so we have 5 boot camps that we're running right now. And one of them is a brand new offering that we haven't done before on grant implementation, compliance, and management. So if you're a city that has won a federal grant, and especially if you have had any sort of turnover on your grants management team, I would highly encourage your teams to enroll in that one. It's open to cities of all sizes, so there's no population cap at all on that one. And we're giving information on the day-to-day as different provisions around the programs change with executive orders and OMB memos and memos from agencies. We'll be adapting our curriculum and giving you meaningful insights. Clean energy projects have obviously been very much in the news, and our experts, again, are trying to help cities really unpack what types of funding are available for those programs now and what will be available on a go forward. And then I'll just say, I think, especially for Safe Streets and Roads for All and for our rail projects, we've seen a lot of action out of the Department of Transportation about the priorities that they're going to be really focused on as they review applications. And so we want to make sure that you're well prepared to address those priorities. So the information is in the chat to register. The boot camp's already started. And so we do have the videos though available of the first session that you would have missed, but you can catch right up. And we still have 3 more months to go. So please do register quickly though, because we're gonna close those out by the weekend. I just wanted to again thank our partners and just iterate that the local infrastructure hub is going to be working closely to bring you actionable insights and to bring the new federal priorities to cities to understand and to navigate. And we hope that you'll share with us any areas where we can support you. And we look forward to seeing you on our next session. Thanks so much.